everyone, and welcome to No Off Season, presented by Mass Mutual. I'm Zena.
I'm Chantel Jennings.
I'm Sabreena Merchant.
And I'm Ben Pickman.
And today on the show, what else is there to talk about? We're in Tampa, baby. It's the Final Four. And we're not just going to go through game by game what you can expect for the Final Four. Of course, we're going to tell you what to look for, who's going to show up. We're going to give you that info, but we're going to do it a little bit more fun because, we're in Florida. Why not? All right. So if you're new here, hit that follow button wherever you're listening. We want to make sure you're staying up to date with us. And of course, if you want, come find us on YouTube. And please reach out to us. Leave us a comment wherever you're listening or a rating. All of it helps us reach more fans and stay connected with all of you. Okay. Ben, Sabreena, Chantel, I don't know if you guys will identify with this, but first thing that the person that checked me in at my hotel goes, "There's so many of you." And I go, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Tall people." She whispered it across the desk. And I was like, "Oh," and I looked around and it was just tall women everywhere. And she's like, "It's not just the women though. It's the men. There was a 7-foot man there." And I was like, I wonder if that's Lauren Betts' father. But either way, we're here in Tampa. We have descended upon Tampa for basketball. How are you guys feeling? You guys excited for the weekend?
I feel like I'm not a tall media member, so I feel kind of left out of this grouping. If we showed up with you, Zena, I don't think we would be considered tall media folks or tall folks. So we're not the former D1 basketball players like you. So
Fair. But have you guys spotted anyone? Have you guys seen anyone that you're not outside of the media, anyone from the college space that you're like, "Oh, saw this person today.
Well, we did do media today, so we did see a lot of them. But
Okay, there you go.
At the airport, I did see Angel McCoughtry, so that was cool.
Oh.
Wait, that is super cool.
Yeah.
I love Angel. That was my number one doppelganger in high school. I was like, anytime somebody told me I looked like her, I was like, yes, Louisville, thank you. Ben, anyone for you?
No tall people. I did see some people hurdling on the University of Tampa track this morning on Thursday morning and thought about
There you go.
I did not run on the track as a result when I saw collegiate hurdles practice going on. I
don't
went
try
somewhere
to-
else instead.
Good call.
I do wanna
Good
say-
call, exactly.
on my flight from Minneapolis, there were a bunch of older, pretty fit dudes, and I was like, what's going on in Tampa? And then I sat next to a guy on the flight who's a former Notre Dame men's ice hockey player, and he's like, "Oh, well, the largest over 50 ice hockey tournament in the country is happening this weekend in Tampa." And I was like, way to go, NCAA, just picking these cities where there's plenty of hotel rooms,
Volleyball,
obviously.
Over 50 ice hockey,
Yeah.
Is there a schedule, a calendar?
But
These
I
sports
thought-
teams and sports leagues got to get it together. What's going on?
Some of those people were tall. I don't think they were 7 foot tall, so I don't think that's who was in your hotel, Zena. But
There you go.
they're 6'4", 6'3" hockey
That
dudes.
That counts. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap that up because clearly I'm staying with all the tall people
We
over
could get going about the over 50
my hotel.
hockey tournament if you want. We
Guys,
got a lot to
I
say
got
about
a
it.
lot of. If we want to do a podcast episode on that, we had a very lengthy conversation about how they put together their roster this season so they wouldn't lose by adding more men who were 51. But I digress. That's a conversation for another day.
Just at the cutoff. Okay, I respect it. All right, well, let me get into what we're going to be doing today because it's going to be fun. And I'm curious, all of you are very smart. Every time you come on this show, you give great insight and stats to support an argument. And I'm wondering, did any of you do debate club in high school or college? No.
No.
All right, well, you're just smart and you just know how to, make an argument for things. I did not do debate club either. I was a student body kind of person, student body club president. That's why I'm hosting this show right now with you guys. But I'm going to try and get my debate skills going because that's what we're going to be doing today. Here's how it's going to work. We are initiating the great Final Four debate of 2025. Here's how it's going to work. Each host, including me, I know, they're including me in this too, has been assigned a different team, and we're going to square off against each other to debate, or at least try to convince one another, which team is going to win their Final Four matchup tonight and make it to the title game. And how about picking winners for each debate? You, dear listener, you will be the one to decide. So make sure you leave a comment or tweet us, hit us up on Insta, you name it. Let us know who wins the great Final Four debate of 2025. That's official, that's copyrighted, it's in the works. Okay, first up, South Carolina versus Texas. Ben will be presenting for South Carolina and Sabreena for Texas. And we flipped a coin before we started recording. Ben, you are going first.
No. I won the coin toss and elected to defer to go second.
Oh, my bad. Okay. So Sabrina's going first. Okay, got it. All right. So this debate, each person's going to get about 3 to 4 minutes each to make their main argument, but then you can rebut against each other, go freely back and forth. And then Zena, myself, Chantel, we'll throw out some questions if we have, to get them going a little bit more. And we'll fill out when it should end, but figure about 15 minutes to debate for this. Okay? You guys ready? Ben, Sabreena?
I mean, I have to be ready, not Ben.
Well, fair, exactly. All right, well, Sabreena, I'm going to start the timer. Go.
I have the Texas Longhorns, who are back in the Final Four for the first time since 2003. They have the second best net rating in the NCAA this season, behind only UConn, but they are not playing UConn in this Final Four game, so that's good news. They have played South Carolina 3 times this season, responded from the first loss with a win, and are going to respond from the second loss also with a win. This is a team that has been playing tremendously good defense over the course of the tournament. They have led wire to wire in 2 of their games. They led after the first quarter for the entirety of the rest of the Illinois game, and just put an absolute beatdown on TCU, a team that a lot of people had as a trendy upset pick heading into that Elite Eight game. And the Longhorns absolutely shut down what was the second best offense in the country, just with a stifling defensive performance. We're talking about the linchpins Rory Harmon at point guard and the combination of Taylor Jones and Kyla Oldacre at center. Anytime you have a defense that can strangle you at the point of attack and in the paint, that's a pretty good recipe to shutting down opposing offenses. This is a team that doesn't have a ton of variance in the way they play because, as my colleague Ben Pickman articulated so well before the start of the tournament, they don't take a lot of threes. So you know what you're going to get from them offensively. Don't go through a lot of ruts, and that means that they're not dependent on jump shot variance, which is a good thing when you're in a new stage in the Final Four where emotions can get pretty high and you don't want to be subject to whether three-pointers are going in or not. This is a team that takes care of the ball exceptionally well, doesn't turn it over all that often. And that's an excellent recipe against a South Carolina team that thrives in transition. So ideally not going to give them a lot of opportunities to get going on the fast break. It is a team that has a lot of veterans. Rory Harmon is a senior. Taylor Jones is a 6th-year senior. Kyla Oldacre is an upperclassman. And they also have a good blend of youth that has injected a lot of life into them as of late. Jordan Lee is probably the best 3-point shooter on the team, has been an excellent defender. Brianna Preston, another excellent point of attack defender that really helped bust Tennessee's offense and TCU's during that Birmingham regional. And then they have Jacqueline Amonitondo, who's done a great job of stepping in for Leah Moore at that starting small forward position. Great burst of athleticism. This is the type of team that has the athletes that can contend with anybody in the country, including South Carolina, which is also one of the most athletic teams in the NCAA. I like an underdog. Texas has lost to South Carolina twice, but they did come back from the first one, and I project that they're going to come back from the second one. They don't have the burden of the pressure of being the defending champion, and no team has repeated as champion since 2016, which puts a lot of extra, burden on South Carolina to carry the weight of having won last season. Vic Schaefer also has a little bit of an underdog edge against Don Staley because, maybe not so great for my argument, but he hasn't done very well in championship games against Don Staley, whether that's at Mississippi State or at Texas. I think it's time to break through, frankly. This is just a wonderful, magical year for Texas. They won the SEC in their first season joining the conference. They were ranked, put together some of the most wins in program history. Madison Booker put together an All-American season. Rory Harmon was able to come back from her ACL tear within 10 months and get back and has been playing marvelously over the course of the last couple months. Sometimes you just got to believe in a little bit of magic from the great state of Texas. And I think you look at a team that has, again, the 3rd best defense in the country, 9th best offense, 2nd best overall net rating. All of those numbers collectively exceed South Carolina. And I think beating a team 3 times in one season is exceptionally challenging. And I don't think that the Gamecocks are going to be able to get it done.
Boom. Okay.
I'd say you
Thank
did pretty
you,
well,
Sabreena.
except for the part where you argued against yourself in terms of the coaching lineups. But
Sometimes you just gotta acknowledge that there are factors working against it.
Fair.
Yeah,
Fair.
fair.
Okay. So, Ben, rebuttals.
Yeah, for me, this matchup is a lot like that Spider-Man meme where you have two teams, Spider-Man staring at Spider-Man, except for I think the objective observer would agree that one Spider-Man is a little bit better and a little bit stronger and a little bit more skilled than the other Spider-Man, and that is the South Carolina Gamecocks in this analogy compared to the Texas Longhorns. And how do we know that, you ask? It is because history is a great teacher in this example, because as Sabreena said, these two teams have played 3 times this season, most recently just a few weeks ago, less than a month ago, and we saw the result of that game. That was a convincing win by South Carolina, 64-45 in the SEC tournament final. A lot of the things Sabreena maps out also apply to South Carolina. She used words like physicality, physical defense, pack the paint. She talked about, young players that are highly skilled and also experienced veterans. Those are, again, also things that apply to this Gamecocks team. Just that, South Carolina has even more experience. They have young players who, sure, someone like Maddie Booker is an All-American, but I would argue that South Carolina's young players on the whole are more productive and more important to the Gamecocks' success as well than the Texas Longhorns. South Carolina, admittedly, is not playing its best basketball right now. They have kind of, I would say, limped in to the Final Four by their standards, and they recognize that they are going to have to play an ugly game. And I do think that, what they were able to overcome against Maryland and Duke and winning by not playing their best is still a confidence booster, knowing that they don't need to play their best to win. And now that they're going to play a familiar opponent in the Final Four who will muck it up similarly, they still believe that, they don't need to play a prolific offensive game to beat Texas. And they have done that this year. Again, they've scored 60 plus points, and beat them. Vic Schaefer has always said that the hardest game to win is that Elite Eight game. And I do think, Sabreena throws out the pressure argument. I do think, South Carolina, the pressure, I don't think it's like heaped on them right now. I don't think they really feel it as the defending champions. I don't think they felt it from the beginning of the season. From the beginning of the year, they never talked about trying to go undefeated. They just talked about kind of focusing on the next game. And I do think there is some weight that is even off of them, that they're back at the Final Four and they're playing a familiar opponent. I think that actually frees them up because they know what they're getting themselves into. They know they could beat this team even if they don't play their A game. And we have seen that throughout this season again. I don't know. I mean, I think we're due for a Mylasia Fulwiley game. Usually she ebbs and flows, and we saw a subpar game by her standard against Duke in the Elite Eight. And I think we're due for an explosion again in the Final Four here against Texas. I also think just from a strategic standpoint, we know what South Carolina is going to do. We know that they're going to sag off Texas's shooters. That's exactly how they kind of beat them in the SEC tournament. In that final, they basically just dared Texas to shoot. And while South Carolina isn't a great shooting team alone, like, I have a hard time believing that South Carolina isn't just going to do the exact same thing at its core. And while Texas knows that's coming, I'm not sure that they're a good enough three-point shooting team to overcome kind of the strategy that South Carolina is going to map out. I think you also run the risk, if you're Texas, by playing a different style than you've played all year, if you're suddenly in the Final Four on Friday night, going to rely on the three-point shot in a way that you haven't before. So, I think there's a little bit of kind of mind game potential there just by baiting three-point shooters, baiting players into taking three-point shots. I think that's at play too. And then Sabreena mentioned it, Dawn Staley versus Vic Schaefer. We've seen the success that Dawn Staley has had. I think, again, you have multiple days to prepare. And more importantly, you have more days than Texas to prepare as well. Like, they've been in the lab since Sunday evening preparing for this game, whereas Texas really had a quick turnaround after their win on Monday night, flying in on Tuesday. They've just had shorter prep time. So I think all that is why the South Carolina Gamecocks, who maybe I should make the case should have been the number 1 overall seed, should be the favorite here. They should be the favorite here against the Texas Longhorns.
Okay. Thank you, debaters, for giving us your takes on both. Chantel, I'm just going to go ahead and jump in here on my first question. My question is going to be to Sabreena. Ben brings up a really great point about the game plan that South Carolina is going to utilize against Texas. And we saw South Carolina have to adjust their game plan against Duke's defense. And they did a great job of slowing the game down, playing in the half court, setting up sets. I'm curious what you think Texas is going to be able to do to counter the defensive strategy that Dawn Staley and her Gamecocks are going to be able to set up for Texas.
Well, Texas has played against teams that pack the paint essentially all season. That's what you're going to do against a team that shoots a lower 3-point rate than any other team in the country, right? 362nd out of 362 teams. So a team that, sucks in their defense is not unlike what Texas has seen over the course of the entire season. And I think Taylor Jones and Kyle Oldacre are playing better now than they have at any point during the season. So being able to establish that center presence is going to be crucial to dealing with a team that is going to try to beat you inside, because the fact that Taylor Jones and Kyle, I think, are bigger than any of the South Carolina posts is going to be really important, and they have to be stronger and assert that matchup. To me, that's where this is going to be won.
I think that's a fair point. I feel like there's sort of a seeding of, Texas has the interior advantage in this game, as good as South Carolina has done since Ashlyn Watkins' season-ending injury at the beginning of the year. I think Texas has the advantage there. Ben, you had said, we're due for a Milasia full Wiley game. And you also said that history is a good teacher. I'm curious what historical markers you will point to in terms of, we've seen Milasia sort of have these really big moments and then have lapses. And there are times, even I think against Duke, she played 11 minutes. Dawn Staley definitely doesn't have a ton of patience for some of the mistakes for Milasia to play through. And so I'm just curious what makes you think that we're due for this, specifically with Milasia?
I just think they know how dynamic she is and how important she is to their success offensively. And she is the kind of player that if they are going to win, breaks them out of some of the, bad habits or ruts that they fall into. And so she has that potential in a way that, frankly, no other player on the floor really does. The other thing I think I would say, Texas relies a lot on points off turnovers. They average almost 24 points per game, points off turnovers. But South Carolina, not exactly a high turnover team. And we have seen, Texas not convert in the same way on giveaways when they play South Carolina. They had just 4 points off turnovers when these two teams met in the SEC championship, right? That's indicative of South Carolina's transition defense, and that even if they're going to commit turnovers, South Carolina is good enough on trans D to get back and slow them down. I also think, bench scoring is another variable here, right? We have seen, certainly over this tournament, Texas's bench, Bree Preston, Kyla Oldacre, they've played really well. But if you're going to look to one team with a superior bench, it's South Carolina. It's not just Full Wiley. It's Joyce Edwards. It's Tessa Johnson. There's such an advantage in not knowing who you can key in on a given night. I think that's a huge boost in terms of preparation, because Texas, again, sure, they're familiar with South Carolina. They're not going to be surprised with their, depth of options, but there is not one player on the Gamecocks you can kind of key in on. Whereas, again, if you've had 5 days to prepare, you can key in on Madison Booker and Rory Harmon. And if you are successful at slowing them down, you put yourself in a really good position. You can't say the same thing on the other end if you're Texas looking at South Carolina.
I think that extra day of preparation that South Carolina has that you alluded to, Ben, matters a lot less when you've already played a team 3 times. And both of those wins that South Carolina had were essentially home court wins. One of them was in Columbia, one of them was in Greenville. This is a neutral site. I think that's going to matter a lot less, that home court advantage factored heavily in the South Carolina win.
I just think people talk about the familiarity of playing a team for the 4th time, that game plan doesn't matter. I would argue that coaches, the games are won on the margins, that if you can find 1 little advantage or 2 little advantages, that could be the difference. They're not rewriting game plans here, but if you can use your extra 24 hours, 36 hours to find a little nugget that you think you can exploit, that very well could be the difference here. I do think that does make a difference.
Well, it's not like they knew they were playing Texas for those full 24 to 36 hours. They could also have been preparing for TCU.
Yeah, that's true. But I think you, as a coaching staff, you start to prepare both scouts. And we know that that's going on for, that experienced staff.
And then as far as his history being our, greatest instructor, I would like to point you to the last time that South Carolina was defending a title. They lost in the Final Four.
Yeah, who did they play in that game?
Who does it matter? They lost in the Final Four.
Who was the best player on that team that they played in?
Madison Booker could be the best player in this game. And as long as the best player is on the opposing team, I think that's a good recipe for an upset.
You don't believe that?
I think Madison Booker could easily be the best player in this game.
No,
100%.
she could be, but you don't believe the upset's going to happen here, Sabreena. And you know how I know that? You know how I know this at the end of the day? Because you have made a prediction.
Well, we don't need to, we're all playing a part here.
Sorry.
It's a
Ben has also written for the last 3 days about how South Carolina is not playing their best basketball right now.
I opened my argument with that. I mean, I really do think that to be the case. But I will pick them nevertheless.
Okay, I think we're going to wrap this up. It's been officially 15 minutes about. This is really good back and forth here. But it's not up to us. It's not up to us. It's up to the listener. Listeners, you've heard Sabreena's argument for Texas. You've heard Ben's argument for South Carolina. What is your belief? Have you been swayed? Have you been bought in by one of these two writers? Let us know. Leave a comment, tweet at us, let us know who won the debate, and we'll see. I mean, obviously, we'll see what the outcome of the game is, but we'll see if one of these writers better predicted the game and also better debated which team should win. Okay, Chantel, it's you and I. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little nervous, particularly because of the rebuttals. I'm trying to figure out. I feel like I have an easy team to be able to argue for. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Don't go hard on me, but don't go soft on me. I don't know, guys. Either way, I got to make the argument for UConn. So I'm just going to go ahead. I actually kind of wrote down my notes because I wanted to make sure I showed up properly in front of you guys. All right, so let's get into it. In my opinion, if you are making a case for who is going to win between UConn and UCLA, this showdown, I think you have to ride with the Huskies. You got to go with the Huskies. And I think it's the obvious thing. Paige Bueckers. She's on another level right now, okay? Sis is averaging 29 points per game in the tournament, okay? She scored 40 points. She has had her third straight 30-point game coming into this one. I mean, she's making history as she goes through, and she's also doing it super efficiently. For those of you that don't know what 50, 40, 90 is, everyone on this podcast does, but for those of you that don't know, that's splits, right? You're shooting 50% from the floor, you're shooting 40% from three, and you're shooting 90% from free throws. It is not normal for people to be able to do this consistently, especially at this level of stage in the tournament, 50, 40, 90, and she's providing that. That's what Paige is providing to her team right now. And I think that is what's going to be uplifting UConn, because if you watch that game against USC and you watch the swagger with which she moves, the rest of the UConn team is picking up on that swagger, including the youngins, the Bibbas. And I'm specifically talking about Sarah Strong, okay? Sarah Strong is a freshman phenom. She doesn't look like she's a freshman. She doesn't even talk like she's a freshman. If you've heard her interviews, she sounds like she's been here before. She sounds like her mom, Allison Feaster, who's played in the W, who upset Tara Vanderveer in the Sweet 16 when her mom played for Harvard way back in the day. I think it was 1999. Sarah Strong is of this caliber. She knows how to play. She knows how to meet the moment. And I think that's huge when you pair that alongside a Paige Bueckers, who last year, let's be real, had to kind of carry the team on her back. Yes, she had Nika Mule. Yes, she had Aaliyah Edwards, but she didn't have much else. This year, she's got a strong crew around her, including, pun intended, Sarah Strong, that's been strong in the paint. She's been mobile on the perimeter. She is an amazing defender, and she doesn't shrink from the moment. And that is what really, really matters against a team like UCLA that has had all the fanfare around it all season. And they also need to make sure that they meet the moment. In the last 8 games, UConn has won 7 of them, but still, UCLA has the number 1 seed overall, and they also have a Lauren Betts. And the Strong Betts matchup is going to be an interesting one, because it's going to be a matter of who can contain inside, right? Who can contain Lauren Betts inside, and UCLA is vulnerable when Lauren Betts is not scoring to the ability that she can. And when she's in foul trouble, we've seen this throughout the tournament. When Lauren Betts goes and sits on the bench, UCLA looks a little suspect, look a little sus, okay? But the depth that UCLA wants, UConn has. And I'm thinking about the X factor, Caitlin Chen. Caitlin Chen showing up last game, 15 points, 6 of 9 from outside the arc. I think that's a person that even if AZ Fudd has another 8-point game like she had against USC, you still have the depth across the bench, across your roster, including Caitlin Chen being a distributor, being a scorer, and people coming off the bench and stepping up. Ashlyn Shade, KK Arnold, Ice Brady even coming in and making things a little bit more difficult. The only thing that UCLA, in my opinion, really has over UConn is size on the perimeter. But I think that can work in UConn's benefit when it comes to the transition game. UConn likes to run, and UCLA struggles to track in transition. We've seen this all season. So I really think there's an advantage there. Last but not least, team defense. UConn has been holding opponents to just 52 points per game in this tournament. That's clamps. That's cookies. That's defense that you need, especially against a UCLA team that can get hot, especially if Lauren Betts is killing inside or getting the ball inside and seeing her perimeter threats. You want UConn to be forcing turnovers. You want them to swarm you. You want them to flip defense into offense, and this is what they've done. They did it against USC. They've done it all season. This is who they are, and I think that kind of toughness, it shows up in March. And this is the moment for Paige Beckers and Gino to really team up and take down the Bruins. I feel like Corey Close, congratulations for Naismith Coach of the Year. But Gino holds the record, most winning games, most amount of games won in college basketball. And I think this one is just going to be another one. That's my argument. Chantel?
All right. Well, I think we can start here, and I'll cite the great Sabreena Merchant here. When she was asked for her bold prediction for this tournament, she said, it's going to be boring. It's going to be really chalky. There aren't going to be a lot of upsets. And she was right. She was very right. And what is chalkier than the number 1 overall seed beating a number 2 seed? 1 beats 2. Okay, so that's where we'll start. The other thing, just from your argument that I wanted to bring up, you said the only advantage that UConn has, or that UCLA has, is size on the perimeter, and I'll agree with you. They definitely have that, but I'm curious who on UConn's roster is 6'7" on the interior. A quick perusal of their roster will show no one. They do have 6'5" Jana El-Alfi. I will give you that. Her best game this year was against South Carolina, and after that, I was like a Jana El-Alfi believer. And to quote Gino Oriema, who was on our podcast shortly after, he said, I forget who they were playing, Seton Hall or someone, he said, yeah, but did you see her last night? She was horrible. Which has been a lot of her performances since then. She hasn't had nearly the kind of performance she had against South Carolina since then. She's 6'5". Past her, they have 6'3" Ice Brady. We had some 6'1" Aubrey Griffin minutes recently. She's played in 14 games this year. But I'm not sure who in that group can sort of match up with Lauren Betts one-on-one. And that's because the answer is no one. UConn cannot guard UCLA one-on-one in the paint because no one can guard UCLA one-on-one in the paint. And I think beyond that, even when they double team her, she's a really good passing big. I think this whole team is really unselfish. UCLA as a whole, they have a lot of players who sort of average in that 8 to 10 point range. But within that, you have players who can sort of pop off and have a huge night. Even in the last few weeks, Kiki Rice averages 13 a game. She had 23 against Richmond. Gabriela Jaquez averages 10. She had 18 against LSU. Tamia Gardner averages 8. She had 15 against LSU, including 5 3-pointers. I think the strength here, and maybe why I believe in UCLA even more now than I did a week ago, was that I've talked to a lot of coaches about game planning for UCLA, and they've said, kind of your best hope is to get Lauren Betts in foul trouble. And that's exactly what LSU did. They had her pick up 2 fouls in the first quarter of that game. She went to the bench, and what did UCLA do? They beat LSU 22-12 in the second quarter. They hit 5 3-pointers, or 4. Tamia Gardner hit 3. I know Gabriela Jaquez hit 1. And they just sort of showed this other element of themselves that even with Lauren Betts on the bench, they weren't going to fold. And a good team like LSU dug themselves a hole in that quarter that they just couldn't come out of, no matter the heroics that Flage had in that game. And so I think that really impresses me. And the other thing that I think they definitely have over UConn is that they have a versatility of lineups here that UConn just simply does not have. to have a player like Tamia Gardner, who is a 6'4" forward, who is also your best 3-point shooter on the team, percentage-wise, is really impressive. They can go big by running out her, Janiah Barker, Angela Buglewicz, Lauren Betts. Like that length is sort of all over the floor, but you can sort of go with like a larger lineup. In football, they would call it a jumbo lineup. I don't know what they would call it in basketball. Maybe Corey has a name for it. They can go smaller with Gabriella Jaquez, London Jones, Kiki Rice. And so they have a lot of different options that I'm just not sure about that matchup when it comes to the UCLA UConn matchups. And then when we're talking about 3-point shooting, you brought up Sarah Strong, you brought up Paige Beckers. Their best 3-point shooter is AZ Fudd, and in the last 2 games, she shot 28% from 3. She missed her first 9 shots against USC in that Elite 8 game. I'm just not positive that she is sort of on it enough in this game to sort of go against the depth and the versatility of weapons that UCLA has. And so for all of those factors, in this debate, I am choosing UCLA.
All right, I have a first
Sabreena,
question
Ben,
for
any
Chantel.
questions?
As much
Dang
as I
it,
love
no.
it,
No, please stop. I
love
don't
that you
want any
started by
follow-ups.
citing-
You're not allowed to ask me follow-ups if I cited you. Ben, do you have anything?
You can go first, Sabreena.
Damn it.
I completely agree with your point that the biggest challenge for UConn is going to be how to defend Lauren Betts. But how do you see UCLA guarding a team like UConn that can spread out 5 out?
Well, I didn't talk about that in my argument because I don't think it's a great point for UCLA. I think this is where they're going to have to rely on, UConn not being super great from range. Like, you're just going to have to give something up. And I think here's where you're going to have to trade a few 2s for 3s and hope that the 2-pointers are hitting at a higher rate than the 3-pointers. And that's where it can even out a little bit, and hope that Lauren Betts, who's the best post in the country, can sort of be that difference maker for you. And on the outside, hope that the rotations, especially, whatever needs to be done, if they're going to double down on Sarah, whatever they're going to do, if they're going to run that sort of matchup zone that they run, like whatever they're going to do, they're just going to have to bank on the fact that Lauren is going to make up that difference with a high percentage of 2. She's averaging 20 and 10. I think she has to be better than her average in this game to beat UConn.
I think it's a good point. Chantel, I will say I enjoyed your argument going one is greater than 2. That was my favorite point that you made. I appreciated that kind
I'm
of
good
analysis.
at math.
You only get
Thanks.
that kind of analysis on the show.
Yeah.
I guess I'll throw a question out at Zena. And look, I've been riding, I will admit, I am a biased party here in that I have been riding the Huskies all tournament long. So that is my current bias. Though, last year I did pick the Bruins to win the title. So not wrong, just early potentially. I say all that to say.
I've heard Ben say not wrong just early about 35 times over the last 3 days.
We've talked a lot about
hilarious.
We've talked a lot about getting T-shirts, and I feel like between Duke, you could have been better, save it for Arkansas, and not wrong but early, we have
Just
3 really
early.
good taglines here.
I
No
think
off
that's
season
all
coming to merch.
Yeah, no off
very
season.
soon.
That'll be our merch. I guess my question for you though, Zena, is
Yeah.
You acknowledge that UConn is playing its best basketball of the season now. And actually, Corey Close made that same point on Thursday in her press conference. But if you take away the South Carolina win in February, which I get is an important win, it's not exactly like UConn has been beating up on really good teams throughout the regular season. We saw them lose to Notre Dame. We saw them lose to USC. We saw them lose to Tennessee. Their conference, not as strong as some other conferences, like without a convincing win. That's partly why they're a 2 seed. I guess what gives you confidence that this UConn team, is capable of winning big games, especially against a Big Ten opponent, because they've been more inconsistent in high leverage competition than I think people want to acknowledge.
Yeah, I think the use of big twice in that statement of big game, Big Ten, interesting. Because I think it is a big moment. And I 1000% believe that if between these 2 teams, the player that has shown up in big moments and been capable of showing up in big moments is Paige Beckers. We've seen Lauren Betts, of course, play big and be a big factor for UCLA, but has she really shown up in this sort of an environment yet? Have we seen Corey Close show up in this sort of an environment yet? I mean, yes, Sarah Strong is a freshman, but 22-17 in that last game showed me that this sort of stage is not something that she's scared of. And it really comes down to a swagger, a demeanor in which you come into this game, and a confidence with which you play. And I'm looking at UConn right now, and I don't want to judge it too hard, but the way that their team is moving and the way that they're acting, even off like of just their social media or just like the post game pressers, and they're feeling really calm, cool, and collected coming into this space. And as if like, no, we're supposed to be here. We messed up last year, but we're supposed to be here. And I feel like that is going to influence the way that they show up and lock in. And I also think that there's something to be said about the way that UConn is closing the season, because sometimes that's when you hit momentum and that's when you hit your stride, is towards the end of the season. Maybe they learned some lessons from those early losses in the year, but right now, all that matters is the game that's in front of you. And if you've got Paige Beckers coming in, averaging almost 30 points a game, playing so well, locked in, and everyone else is kind of following in line behind that, I think that gives you an advantage and the composure you need to perform on this kind of stage. No, come at me, sis.
Okay. Zena, you took a cross-country flight today. I'm just curious how you're feeling.
did.
You flew from LA to Tampa. How are you feeling? Your legs feel good?
I'm old. I'm old, Chantel. Don't do that. I'm old, so I don't circulate blood around my body as well as young college students do. But yeah, no, I mean it's a fair point. UConn looked a little tired when the band was in front of them, blowing
I'll
their
just say,
clarinets.
They and Gino Auriemma has talked about this. They have the shortest turnaround of any team in the Final Four this week. They played a really late game Monday night in Spokane. So twice in 1 week now, they will have done cross-country flights with 3-hour time changes, first going east to west, now going west to east. They flew here on Tuesday. I went from Central to Pacific to Eastern time, and my body still doesn't know what's going on. Granted, I'm in my mid-30s. I am not an elite college athlete, and I'm sure that they are doing things to counteract that. But I do feel like the body clocks and the time change and the jet lag and the 6-hour flights, like that is something that is a factor. And like Ben said, these games are won on the margins. We're talking about two teams that are elite, that are prepared, that are coming for this moment. And when you look at the margins, like 2 6-hour flights in the span of a week, those time changes, like those could be some margins that might matter.
I think
agree
in the
with you.
history of
I
the
agree with
Super
you.
Regional, the teams that have won on Sunday versus Monday are undefeated in the Final Four.
Oh, interesting. Thank you, Sabreena.
Sabreena,
This
just
does not bode well for my
hey,
Texas
wait.
argument.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Sabreena. Is there a
You're
reason why
just
you just threw
blowing
that
your
statistic in
argument
now?
That's
it just
funny that
occurred
you
to me
didn't
as
mention that.
Chantel was talking.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Health is real. Health is real. I want to get back to a little bit of X's and O's though, real quick, Chantel, because I think Ben, you might have been the one to ask about, spreading the floor. My question is, if the matchup is, I don't know, Lauren Betts against Jano Alfie, they find a way to do a cross screen, get Strong in front of Lauren Betts. They pull her out away from the basket, and Sarah Strong is taking Betts one-on-one to the basket, getting her in foul trouble. What happens if Lauren Betts has to sit for a while with UCLA? You talked about the dynamic lineups. Like, what do you anticipate happening for that?
I mean, at that point, then Janiah Barker is on the floor. I'd like to quote a coach if I can. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse this much on the pod, if I can get an okay from our producers. But we'll have a story running on the site this week. Actually, on Friday when this runs, I spoke with 5 coaches who scouted played against every team. And this specific coach was talking to me about playing UCLA. This is a coach who game planned for UCLA. And this coach was saying this specifically, like if other players get in foul trouble, if other players are not able to be in the game, they said, okay, let's say those guys don't play good and you put Barker in. I mean, goddamn, she's really good, like really good. This is an all SEC player that Corey Close is bringing off the bench. Like, what a luxury to have someone like that you're bringing off the bench. She might not have sort of the all-around game of someone like Sarah Strong, who is, a total 3-level scorer. I love Sarah Strong's game, so I will cede that. But I think defensively, with her athleticism, her length, her speed, her quickness, her lateral movement, like Janiyah Barker is someone that defensively can hold up to what they're, Jana Alfie doesn't have that kind of mobility in the post. Sarah Strong does, but I think what you can bring off the bench, whether it's Tamia, whether it's Janiyah, I think UCLA has the depth there, and they do run 9 deep. Corey Close is very active with her subbing. I was not going to bring that up as a part of my argument because it's not necessarily something I always love, but I think because of that heavy subbing this season, you have a lot of players who have played in big minutes that they can rely on to call on those players when they need them.
Okay, well, it will be a battle of the depth of UConn versus the depth of
I'm
UCLA.
very excited
of
for the
course.
explicit warning on this pod now because I
There are
said the
people
F
that
word twice.
listen to us while dropping their kids off at school.
I know.
Chantel.
I should have probably, sorry.
You did
Sometimes
say
I was,
you wanted
maybe
an
our
okay
producer.
from your producers, so I think
yeah. So hopefully if anyone,
Yeah, you didn't even wait. You didn't even wait. Anyways, it'll be fine. We might have to insert some bleeps in there if you've
Yeah.
heard the bleep. That's what we did.
Yeah.
Anyways, this is good. This was fun. I need your help, though, guys. All of you listening, you got to help us figure out who won those debates, and if the winners line up with who you think is actually going to win tonight. We got all our social handles and our info in the episode description below, or just Google us. That's cool. I've never said that before. Just Google us, share the episode, and let us know who you think won the debate and who you think will win later. Speaking of winners, we're just going to go ahead and head over into a little prediction corner. Without knowing the outcomes to the games tonight, I want some predictions from you all on who's going to win it all. So, Ben, I'm going to go with you first. Who do you think is going to win it all on Sunday?
The UConn Huskies will be winning the championship on Sunday, and I expect the game to look a lot like the 2022 national championship, the game in which South Carolina beat University of Connecticut, in which it becomes very apparent very early on that UConn is better than their opponent, who in this case is going to be South Carolina. I'm expecting a little flip of the script from that title game in Minneapolis.
Boom. Okay. Chantel?
I'm a little torn here. I think I'll caveat this. Whoever wins UCLA UConn wins the national championship is what I think. And I have gone back and forth on that game when we had to make our picks last week. Even after watching UConn in Spokane, I picked UCLA. I had also seen UCLA in Spokane, but after sort of seeing how they played, I went with UCLA. There is a part of me, though, that sort of feels like Paige Beckers is on this mission this season. And I believe it's Ben who always says pick the best player to win in these sort of situations. And I do think the best player left in the tournament right now is Paige Beckers. I think the second best is Lauren Betts, which makes this a hard decision. So I'll say right now UConn, but I do think it's whoever wins between UConn and UCLA will be the team that wins the national title.
Okay. Sabreena?
I mean, I'm Queen Chalk, so #1 overall seed UCLA. The best player thing is nice, but Caitlin Clark did not win a title the last 2 years, so who's to say that always works?
Oh,
True.
that's a really good point. That's a good point. Oh, I'm struggling because I'm telling you, I never want to bet against Dawn Staley. I never want to bet against her. However, that Duke game made me look a little differently at the Gamecocks of just how much they could control a game and also control their own destiny when defense is turned up. And I just feel like whoever is going to win that UConn UCLA game is going to give them a run for their money. So I think I might be going UConn. I'm also very much on the Paige Beckers train right now. She's playing some inspired basketball. And I used to hate that term, but it's real and I'm seeing it. And I'm like, I really think she's gonna will her way to a championship. Okay.
Zena, I was really hoping you were going to go with the dad joke and say you don't bet against Dawn Staley, but you do bets against Dawn Staley.
That'd have been good. That'd have been good. Oh, by the way, on that note, I got a really great dad joke in my Uber on the way to my hotel in Tampa. Guys, What type of room doesn't have walls?
This is really good radio.
It's a mushroom. Okay, that's all we've got for you guys today. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Sabreena and Chantel. Thank you all for listening. Couple programming notes as we head into this momentous weekend. We will be hitting your feeds with an audio-only show sometime on Saturday afternoon or evening. I will prepare another dad joke for that, so just be mentally ready. We're going to be breaking down the Final Four and looking ahead to the title game. Then we'll be back in your feed on Monday morning with our reactions to the big game itself. There will be no pod on Tuesday next week, but we will be coming to you on Wednesday and Friday. And don't forget, as always, there is more to read and watch over at our partner, the Yahoo Sports Hub. So check it out, sports.yahoo.com/women-sports. On behalf of The Athletic, I'm Zena Cada. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to our dad jokes, and we will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to No Off Season. To hear more, be sure to like and subscribe. We drop new episodes every Tuesday and Friday.